Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I remember the first time I saw it. The Forgotten Ring. Tucked away in the farthest corner of the performance center, half in the shadows. It looked just like the others. Same ropes, same turnbuckles, same faded WWE logo in the middle of the mat. But something about it felt different. It was the way people avoided it. How even the trainers, the ones who had seen it all, never let their eyes linger on it for too long. I had just signed with WWE's developmental program, a dream I had chased since I was a kid. The moment I walked into the facility, I knew I had made it. The walls were covered in posters of legends. The air carried the scent of sweat and ambition, and the sound of bodies hitting the mat echoed through the massive space like a war drum. I wanted to soak in every part of it, every ring, every weight rack, every inch of that place. But not that ring. That one was different. I noticed in my first week, no one trained in it. No drills, no matches, not even a stray duffel bag thrown inside. It just sat there, silent and untouched, like a tombstone at the edge of a forgotten graveyard. Why doesn't anyone use that ring? I asked one of the veteran trainers, a guy named Mark. He didn't even look at it, just shook his head like I had asked something I wasn't supposed to. Just stay away from it, kid, he muttered, then walked off. That should have been my warning. I should have listened, but I didn't. That night, I stayed late. I wanted to put in extra reps, push myself harder than the rest. Everyone had left except for a few janitors running floor buffers in the distance. I was alone, except for the sound of my own breath and the faint hum of the overhead lights. And then I heard it, a rope creaking, slow at first, a quiet stretch and groan, like someone had leaned against it. I turned, expecting to see another trainee messing around, but there was no one there. I stared at the ring. The ropes swayed slightly, like they had just been used. I told myself it was nothing, probably just settling. Maybe I had imagined it. I went back to my stretches. Then came the sound, a deep, heavy thud, like a body hitting the mat. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a noise, it was real. The kind of sound you feel in your chest, the impact of flesh on canvas. It was the unmistakable sound of someone taking a bump in the ring. But the ring was empty. The air around me felt colder. Not just a little, a lot. Like I had stepped into a freezer. I took a slow step toward the ring, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I didn't want to, but something pulled me forward. A sick kind of curiosity, the same thing that makes people slow down when they pass a car accident. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the middle rope. And then, BM, one of the turnbuckles snapped backward, violently, as if something had just crashed into it. I stumbled back, barely catching myself. My vision blurred for a second, my brain struggling to process what had just happened. My instinct screamed at me to run, and I did. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the performance center, my legs carrying me faster than I thought possible. I didn't say anything the next day, didn't ask questions, didn't even look in the direction of that ring. But I needed to know. A few days later, I found one of the older trainers, an ex-wrestler named Reggie, who had been around longer than most. I asked him point blank what happened in that ring. He didn't answer right away, just sighed and rubbed his face like he was tired of carrying a weight no one else could see. His name was Eric Vaughn. He finally said, "Up in Comer. Good kid. Trained harder than anyone." I knew the name. Every trainee did. Eric Vaughn had been one of the Performance Center's rising stars years ago, but his career ended before it even started. I had never heard why. Freak accident, Reggie continued. Was practicing a new move. Landed wrong. Snapped his neck. Died right there in that ring. A chill ran down my spine. No one talks about it, he added. WWE kept it quiet. Out of respect. Out of something else. I swallowed hard. Something else. Reggie hesitated. Then he leaned in, voice lower. They say he never left. A lump formed in my throat. They've tried to take the ring down, he went on. Try to replace it. But every time, something happens. Lights blow out. Equipment malfunctions. One guy even broke his leg moving a post. After a while, they just left it. No one trains in it. No one touches it. I thought about the creaking ropes, the sound of the bump, the freezing air, and the turnbuckle snapping backward, as if someone had just hit it. I haven't stayed late at the Performance Center since, and I sure as hell haven't gone near that ring. Some dreams aren't worth chasing. Story 2. Back in 2010, I worked as a production assistant for WWE. Not exactly a glamorous job, but got me close to the action. My nights were spent in the shadows of giant arenas, watching legends take the stage while I handled the little things, lighting cues, pyro timing, making sure the right effects happened at the right moment. It was routine work, predictable in its own way, until the night of The Undertaker's last ride. It was a house show, nothing too major. Just one of those untelevised events WWE ran to keep fans engaged in between pay-per-views. But that night, something felt different. Off, like the air itself had changed. You ever get that sense? That deep, gut-level instinct that something is wrong, even if you can't put your finger on it? That's how I felt when they rolled out the hearse. Now, let me be clear, this wasn't just any prop. WWE had dozens of fake hearses over the years, cheap shells built for quick spots. But this was real. A legit funeral car, purchased from some defunct mortuary in New Orleans. The kind of vehicle that had carried actual bodies, seen actual death. It had been in storage for years, gathering dust in the WWE warehouse, until someone, probably an overzealous creative team member, decided to bring it back for one last entrance. My job was simple. Make sure it rolled out on cue. Fog machines timed perfectly, lights dimmed at just the right second. We wheeled it into position behind the curtain, the engine off. The thing smelled like old leather and mildew, with a faint undertone of something else. Something sweet, almost sickly. And then I heard it. A shuffle from inside. I froze. My first thought was that someone, maybe a stagehand, maybe even Taker himself, had climbed in early. But there was no reason for that. He was backstage, prepping, nowhere near this thing. One of the other crew members, a guy named Danny, heard it too. He knocked on the tinted window and laughed. "Taker, you in there already?" No response. He shrugged it off, but my skin prickled. It wasn't the kind of sound you'd expect. No settling frame, no shift in weight. It was deliberate, like someone moving, like someone adjusting their position inside a coffin. The cue hit. The hearse started rolling forward, pushed by two crew members, gliding toward the entrance like a specter of death. The crowd roared as the gong struck, as the fog billowed. I waited. The doors were supposed to open. Undertaker was supposed to step out, slow and deliberate, shrouded in smoke. That was the plan. That was what should have happened. But the doors creaked open, and there was no one inside. The fog curled into the empty space, swirling around nothing. The crowd, thousands of people, fell into an eerie silence. Not the kind of stunned a WWE loved. This was different. This was unnatural. Even from my position near the stage, I could feel it. A wrongness settling over the building like a storm cloud. The speakers crackled, and then, almost like an afterthought, The Undertaker's theme hit again from the backstage area. I turned just in time to see him step out from the gorilla position, looking confused. His eyes flicked toward the hearse, his expression unreadable beneath the dim arena lights. He wasn't supposed to come from backstage. He was supposed to be in that car, but he wasn't, because something else had been. The rest of the match went on like normal. Taker worked his routine, went through the motions, but I could tell he was off, distracted. He barely glanced at the hearse after that. And when he finished the match, he walked straight back through the curtain without his usual slow, methodical exit. After the show, security was sent to check the vehicle. I tagged along, a sick feeling curling in my stomach. The inside was exactly as it had been, empty, but then I saw the windows. Handprints, smeared across the dusty glass from the inside. Not just one or two, dozens. Some small, some large, some with fingers that looked wrong, like they were too long or twisted at unnatural angles. Danny stared at them, his face pale. Nope, I'm done. He walked off, didn't even clock out, just left. The hearse was wheeled back into storage that night. WWE never used it again. But here's the thing. 2 weeks later, the warehouse crew went to move it. They found it unlocked, despite it having been padlocked shut after the incident. The back doors were open. Inside, sitting on a cracked leather seat, was a single black glove, the kind the Undertaker used to wear. Only he had both of his. No one could explain it. No one wanted to explain it. The hearse was sold off quietly, sent to a scrapyard out in the middle of nowhere. But I'll tell you this, sometimes, late at night, when I'm half asleep, I still hear the sound. That soft, shuffling movement, like something inside trying to get out. Story 3. I was part of the WWE production crew during a live Monday Night Raw taping. Not a glamorous job, but it paid well, and for a guy like me, someone who had spent his teenage years idolizing The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin, it felt like working in a dream. My role was simple. Monitor the Titantron feed, make sure the graphics ran smoothly, and handle any last-minute changes. That night, we had a segment featuring Bray Wyatt. You know the kind, lights down, eerie music, the kind of entrance that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. His visuals were always unsettling, filled with flickering lights, grainy film effects, and unsettling imagery. It was supposed to look creepy, sure, but controlled creepy. But then, something happened that wasn't in the script. Right in the middle of the segment, the Titantron glitched. Not your standard flicker, not a frame drop. This was different. The screen seemed to shudder, like an old VHS tape being fast-forwarded and rewound at the same time. I frowned, fingers hovering over my keyboard, ready to stabilize the feed. Then I saw it. A face. Not Bray Wyatt's. Not any wrestlers. It was there for less than a second, but that was long enough. Eyes hollow, lips curled back, stretched wide in a scream that had no sound. The skin, if you could call it that, looked warped like melted plastic. And the longer I stared, the more I swore I saw a movement, as if it knew I was looking at it. Then, snap, the feed was back to normal. Wyatt's eerie lantern glow returned, his figure emerging through the smoke like nothing had happened. The crowd cheered. The production team carried on like usual, but I was frozen in place, my pulse hammering in my ears. I turned to my colleague, Mike, who had been watching the feed with me. His face was ghost white. "You saw that, right?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He just nodded. After the show, when the arena had emptied and the ring crew was packing up, we went back to the production room to review the footage. My stomach churned as I scrolled frame by frame, hunting for the moment when the glitch occurred. Nothing. It wasn't there. The glitch, the face, gone. Like it had never happened. Mike backed away from the monitor, rubbing his arms like he was cold. No way. No damn way. We didn't talk about it after that. Some things you just don't try to explain. But curiosity is a funny thing. A few weeks later, I made the mistake of asking one of the older tech guys if anything weird had ever happened with the Titantron before. He hesitated, looked at me the way someone does when they're deciding whether or not to tell you something you don't want to know. Back in the 90s, he finally said, "A guy named Lenny worked the Titantron setup for pay-per-views. Hard-working dude, always the first to show up, last to leave." I nodded, waiting. One night, they were testing a new setup for Survivor Series, he continued. Something went wrong with the rigging. The screen collapsed. Lenny was underneath it. I swallowed. He died. Yeah, right there, in the middle of the damn arena. They covered it up best they could, called it an equipment failure, moved on. But people started seeing things in the feed after that. Faces. Shadows where there shouldn't be any. Sometimes, the Titantron would glitch out during live shows for no reason, but only for people watching in real time. It never showed up in replays. I felt the blood drain from my face. And you think that was him? The old tech shrugged. I don't think. I know. I didn't ask anything else. But the next time I worked Raw, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the Titantron. Waiting. I haven't worked WWE production since.